The invasion begins. The night sky over Earth was clear. The stars shined like tiny lanterns in the dark. People in cities, towns, and villages carried on with their normal lives. No one knew that everything was about to change. High above the planet, in the emptiness of space, a massive fleet was waiting. The Galactic Empire, the strongest force in the galaxy, had arrived. Their warships were dark, sharp, and deadly. They floated like giant beasts, watching their prey. The Zyrex commander, Lord Kragor, stood on his ship's bridge, looking at Earth. "Such a small, weak world," he said with a smirk. "This will be over in minutes." The Zyrex Empire had conquered hundreds of planets. They had destroyed civilizations that were far more advanced than Earth. To them, humans were nothing but insects, fragile, weak, and unworthy of mercy. A Zyrex officer stepped forward. "Shall we begin the attack, Lord Kragor?" Kragor nodded. "Yes. Let them know they are nothing." The first strike. Without warning, bright blue beams shot down from the sky. They moved faster than the human eye could follow. Boom, boom, boom. Buildings exploded. Streets cracked open. Fire swallowed entire cities. In New York, people screamed as skyscrapers fell like toy blocks. In Beijing, bridges collapsed, throwing cars into the river. In London, the Big Ben Tower shattered into pieces. Everywhere, chaos spread. The Zyrex didn't just attack. They hunted. War machines landed, releasing tall, armored soldiers with glowing red eyes. They marched through the streets, blasting anything that moved. Humans tried to fight back. The military fired missiles. Jets launched attacks. But nothing worked. The Zyrex ships had shields stronger than any human weapon. Bombs exploded harmlessly against their armor. A Zyrex warrior grabbed a soldier by the neck and lifted him into the air. The soldier struggled, his face turning red. The alien grinned. "Weak," he whispered before tossing the man aside like trash. Across the world, the same scene played out. The Zyrex were unstoppable. No hope left. In an underground command bunker, a group of world leaders watched in horror. A gray-haired general slammed his fist on the table. "We're losing." A scientist shook his head. "No, we lost the moment they arrived." No country was safe. No army could stop them. The Zyrex were simply too powerful. In the ruins of Paris, a young girl held her crying little brother. She whispered, "Don't worry. Someone will stop them." But deep inside, she knew it was a lie. There was no one left to fight. The Zyrex celebrate too soon. Back on his warship, Lord Kragor laughed. His army had crushed the humans in just a few hours. "Pathetic creatures," he muttered. "We should burn the rest of the planet and move on." But then, something strange happened. On the holographic map, a red signal appeared underground, deep beneath the city ruins. It was a small signal, but it was moving fast. A Zyrex officer frowned. "Something is happening beneath the surface, my lord." Kragor raised an eyebrow. "What?" "Humans are too weak for tricks." But the signal grew stronger, then another, and another. Hundreds of them. And suddenly, the Zyrex lost communication with one of their ground squads. Then another. Then another. It was impossible. The Zyrex had already won. There was no human army left. So who was fighting back? Kragor narrowed his glowing eyes. Find out what's happening, and crush it. But deep underground, the true battle was about to begin. The unexpected resistance. The Zyrex Empire believed they had already won. The battle seemed over. The skies belonged to them. The great cities of Earth were reduced to flames and rubble. Humans ran like ants beneath their war machines, helpless and broken. To the Zyrex, this was not a war. It was extermination. But deep beneath the surface, in the forgotten corners of the world, something stirred. And for the first time in their long history, the Zyrex were about to feel something new. Fear, the silent revolt. Beneath the ruins of what was once Chicago, In a dark and dusty subway tunnel, a group of survivors huddled around a flickering screen. The walls were covered in old cables, batteries, and salvaged computer parts. There was no official government left, no military command. But there was still a fight to be had. A man sat at the center of it all, his fingers moving across a keyboard at blinding speed. He was Lucas Vance, a blind hacker once considered nothing more than a tech geek. Now he was Earth's last hope. "The Xerex think they control our systems," Lucas muttered, his fingers dancing over the keys. "They're wrong." The screen lit up with alien code, flashing symbols and numbers that made no sense to anyone else. But to Lucas, it was a language he had already learned to break. "Did it work?" a voice asked behind him. Lucas didn't answer immediately. His ears were sharper than his missing sight, and he could hear the distant hum of Xerex patrol drones above the streets. He had no time to waste. Then the screen flickered, and the message appeared. Xerex Warship Number 17. Systems failure. A slow grin spread across Lucas's face. "It worked," he whispered. Above them, in the sky once ruled by the Xerex, one of their warships trembled. The mighty craft, armed with unbreakable shields, suddenly lost power. The ship's engines died. The bright blue lights on its surface flickered, then vanished. And then, silence. The great warship, once invincible, plummeted from the sky. The weak strike back. The Xerex commander, Lord Kragor, stared at the wreckage in shock. A ship had just fallen, not because of human weapons, but because of something else. "Impossible," he growled. "Humans have no power over our systems." But then another ship shuddered in midair. And another. The lights in their helmets flickered, weapons glitched, and communications were suddenly silent. The Xerex had been hacked. The weakest of humanity. Those without strength, without weapons, without armies, were using brains over brute force. And it wasn't just Lucas. Across the world, others were fighting back. In a shattered hospital, Dr. Helena Carter, a wheelchair-bound scientist, repurposed medical nanobots to infect Xerex armor, making it brittle. In the ruins of Tokyo, Akio Matsuda, a mute engineer, used sound wave disruptors to disable Xerex exosuits, leaving them vulnerable. In an abandoned factory, Samuel Briggs, an ex-convict missing an arm, turned industrial machinery into deadly Xerex trapping devices. The Xerex never considered these people a threat. They had overlooked them as useless and weak. And that was their biggest mistake. Panic in the Empire. Inside the Xerex command ship, alarms blared. Officers rushed to their control panels, desperate to understand what was happening. "Our ships are failing," one shouted. "Our weapons won't fire," another cried. Lord Kragor's eyes burned with rage. Who is doing this? But deep in the underground tunnels of Earth, Lucas Vance only smiled. He pressed another key, and the screen flashed again. Xerex Warship Number 23. Systems failure. Another great warship fell from the sky. Lord Kragor clenched his fists. "Find them. Crush them." The Xerex ground forces immediately deployed, hunting down the resistance. But the humans had one advantage. They knew their own planet better than the invaders. The aliens searched in the wrong places. Their vision was sharp, but they didn't see the real danger. Until it was too late. The battle beneath the streets, Xerex forces stormed into an abandoned subway station in search of the hackers. Their armored boots echoed loudly against the cracked stone floors. Their glowing red eyes scanned the darkness, looking for the pathetic creatures responsible for the attack. They never saw the thin wires spread across the floor. A deafening explosion tore through the tunnel, collapsing the entrance behind them. Smoke and dust filled the air. When the dust settled, the Xerex squad was trapped. From the shadows, a small girl stepped forward. She was no older than 14, her clothes ragged, her face smeared with dirt. In her hands, she held a small detonator, the same device that had just triggered the blast. One of the Xerex warriors aimed his weapon at her. "You are nothing," he growled. The girl only smirked. "That's what you think." She pressed another button. Above them, on the surface, a massive fuel tank exploded, causing an entire building to collapse. Concrete and steel rained down on the Zyrex forces like a hammer from the gods. The trap was perfect. The week had struck again. The Zyrex's nightmare begins. The Zyrex Empire came to Earth expecting an easy victory. Now they were losing squads, losing ships, losing control. A new kind of war had begun. A war where strength meant nothing, but cunning, adaptation, and resilience meant everything. And for the first time since the invasion began, the Zyrex felt something chilling crawl up their spines. They felt fear. The trap is set. The Zyrex had never known defeat. For centuries, they had conquered worlds without resistance. Their technology was superior. Their armies were unmatched. Their enemies always fell within hours. But on Earth, something was different. They had expected an easy victory. Instead, they found a nightmare. Their warships were falling from the sky. Their soldiers were trapped in ruins, ambushed in the dark, hunted in a war they didn't understand. And worst of all, their enemy was invisible. The commander's fury. Inside the Zyrex flagship, Lord Kraegor's anger burned like a raging fire. The war table in front of him displayed a holographic map of Earth, showing Zyrex-controlled zones. The red areas indicated where human resistance had been detected. The red was spreading. "Explain this to me," Kraegor growled. His deep voice rattled the walls of the command room. His officers trembled before him. Humans are weak. Their weapons are useless. Their armies are gone. So why are we losing? A nervous Zyrex tactician stepped forward. "It is not their soldiers, my lord. It is their other humans. The ones we ignored." Kraegor's eyes narrowed. "Explain." The tactician hesitated before speaking. "We have made a mistake. We focused on destroying their military. But these humans, they are not soldiers. They are engineers, hackers, mechanics, scavengers. They are using our own technology against us." Kraegor slammed his clawed fist into the table. "Then find them and wipe them out." But deep underground, in the abandoned tunnels and wreckage of the cities, the humans had other plans. The bait. A storm raged over what was once Washington, D.C. The Zyrex had turned the city into rubble, but the resistance still moved beneath the surface. Inside an old sewer tunnel, Lucas Vance sat cross-legged, his blind eyes fixed on the glow of his laptop screen. Around him, cables snaked along the ground, connected to stolen Zyrex transmitters. "Are you sure about this?" asked Dr. Helena Carter, adjusting herself in her wheelchair. Lucas grinned. "They want to hunt us. Fine. Let's lead them into our jaws." His fingers danced over the keyboard. Above ground, in the destroyed city, an emergency signal was suddenly broadcast on all Zyrex channels. A single, desperate human voice crackled through the alien speakers. "To any survivors, we are underground. We need help. We have weapons. We can fight back. We must fight back." The message was fake. It was a trap. The Zyrex take the bait. High above the clouds, Zyrex hunter ships picked up the signal. Inside one of the hovering warcraft, a squad of elite Zyrex warriors listened to the distress call. The squad leader sneered. "Pathetic. They are gathering for a last stand. How foolish." He turned to his pilot. "Send the message to Lord Kraegor. Tell him we have found their main hideout." Within minutes, the entire Zyrex fleet above Washington shifted direction. Hundreds of soldiers, armed with plasma rifles and exosuits, stormed toward the ruins, ready to crush the last of humanity. They did not know they were walking into the lion's den. The trap is sprung. The moment the first Zyrex boots touched the ground, the earth trembled beneath them. Boom! A massive explosion erupted under the street, sending a Zyrex patrol vehicle flying through the air. Flames shot into the sky, and a wave of fire engulfed an entire platoon. Zyrex soldiers screamed, their armor melting as they fell. From the ruins, hidden snipers fired stolen Zyrex weapons, piercing alien exosuits in their weak spots. From underground tunnels, engineers triggered hacked machinery, turning construction robots into war machines. They charged forward like iron beasts, smashing into Zyrex ranks. And then, from the collapsed buildings, dozens of traps activated at once. Plasma mines erupted beneath the feet of the invaders. Poisonous gas, stolen from Zyrex supply ships, flooded the air. Hacked Zyrex drones turned on their own soldiers, raining fire upon their masters. The battlefield became a slaughterhouse. The mighty Zyrex Empire, who had thought this war was already won, was being ripped apart. The unseen enemy. The Zyrex warriors tried to retreat, but they had nowhere to run. Lord Krager's command ship hovered above the battlefield, watching in horror. They knew we were coming, a Zyrex officer stammered. Krager's hands tightened into fists. They set us up. And then, before his eyes, something unthinkable happened. A Zyrex warship, one of their own, turned its weapons against them. Inside the stolen ship, Lucas Vance sat calmly, his hands on a hacked control panel. Zyrex technology is interesting, he mused. A little complicated, but nothing I can't fix. With a final keystroke, he unleashed chaos. The captured warship opened fire, obliterating the Zyrex forces below. Krager's rage turned into shock. They have control of our ships. How? How? For the first time in his life, Lord Krager realized the truth. The humans weren't just resisting. They were winning. The fear spreads. The battle in Washington was over. The Zyrex had been decimated. The surviving aliens fled, abandoning their fallen, something they had never done before. High above, inside the Zyrex War Council, Lord Krager's claws dug into the armrest of his chair. His eyes burned with hatred. And something else. Unease. Send a message to the Emperor, he growled. Tell him, Earth is not what we thought. Across the stars, in the heart of the Zyrex Empire, the Supreme Emperor of the Zyrex received the message. He listened. He was silent for a long time. And then, with slow realization, he whispered, We have underestimated them. The Zyrex panic. The Zyrex Empire had ruled the stars for over 1,000 years. They had conquered countless planets, crushed entire civilizations, and never lost a war. But now, on a small, weak planet called Earth, they were losing. And for the first time in their history, the Zyrex felt fear. The aftermath of a disaster. High above the burning remains of Washington, D.C., Lord Krager stood inside his command warship, staring at the wreckage below. What had begun as a simple mission, a routine extermination, had become a nightmare. Krager's glowing red eyes swept over the battlefield. Zyrex corpses littered the streets. Their once mighty war machines lay in flaming ruins. Their warships had fallen from the sky, hacked by humans who should have never posed a threat. A heavy silence filled the bridge. No one dared to speak. Finally, Krager turned to his officers. His voice was cold. Dangerous. Explain, he demanded. The officers hesitated, exchanging nervous glances. No one wanted to be the one to answer. No one wanted to be the one to tell their ruthless leader the truth. At last, one officer stepped forward. His voice trembled. My lord, we underestimated the humans. Krager's claws tightened into a fist. Underestimated. Yes, my lord, the officer continued, swallowing hard. The resistance. It's not what we thought. These humans, they are adapting. The bridge fell into a deep, heavy silence. The word hung in the air like a curse. The Zyrex had seen many enemies over the years. Warriors, conquerors, even rival empires. But never before had they faced a species that could adapt to them so quickly. Never before had they fought a species that learned from every loss and turned it into a weapon. And it wasn't just their soldiers. It was their hackers, their engineers, their scavengers. The the ones the Zyrex had ignored. The weaklings were the ones bringing the Empire to its knees. The Emperor's wrath. Far across the galaxy, deep within the Zyrex homeworld, a massive black fortress loomed over the capital city. Inside, in a dark chamber filled with glowing alien symbols, the Supreme Emperor of the Zyrex sat upon his throne. A hologram of Lord Kragor flickered before him. The battle reports filled the air. Ships lost, soldiers dead, war machines destroyed. The Emperor's long, bony fingers drummed against the armrest of his throne. Then, slowly, he stood. His eyes burned with fury. "This is an embarrassment," he hissed. His voice was low, dangerous, venomous. The great Zyrex Empire, humiliated by primitive creatures. Kragor lowered his head. Ashamed. "We were not prepared, my Emperor. The humans are. Unpredictable. They are using our own technology against us. They err." The Emperor raised a hand, silencing him instantly. Then he smiled. A slow, cruel, knowing smile. "Then we will stop playing with them." Kragor frowned. "My Emperor." The Emperor stepped forward, his long robe dragging across the floor. He reached out, touching one of the glowing alien symbols in the air. Immediately, a new hologram appeared. A new fleet. Bigger, deadlier, more ruthless than anything Earth had seen before. "Deploy the Doom-class warships," the Emperor ordered. "Send the Omega Legion. If the humans want war, then we will give them war." Kragor's eyes widened. "The Omega Legion? But my Emperor, those air." "Unstoppable," the Emperor finished for him. His voice was icy cold. "And that is what we need." Then, in a whisper, he added, "I want Earth burned to ash." The sky turns to fire. Back on Earth, the resistance fighters had barely begun to celebrate their victory when the sky changed. At first, it was a distant rumble, like a coming storm. Then, the clouds twisted, darkened, and churned. The wind howled, pulling at the ruins, sending dust spiraling into the air. And then, they came. The Dune-class warships were unlike anything humanity had ever seen. They were colossal, each one 10 times the size of the warships that had come before. Their black hulls shimmered like living shadows. Their weapons glowed with an unnatural red light, charged with an energy strong enough to crack a planet in half. At the sight of them, hope died. Inside an underground bunker, Lucas Vance sat with his team, staring at the screens in front of him. His fingers hovered over the keyboard, his blind eyes narrowing. He could hear the fear in the room, the tension, the silence. Finally, he spoke. "We're gonna need a bigger plan." The Omega Legion lands. The Doom-class warships did not fire immediately. Instead, from their bellies, they unleashed something worse. The Omega Legion. They were not soldiers. They were monsters. Massive biomechanical war beasts, engineered in Zyrex labs for one purpose: extermination. They did not think. They did not feel. They did not hesitate. They simply killed. As they hit the ground, the earth shook beneath their feet. Some were 10 meters tall, their metal bodies covered in spiked armor, their arms ending in plasma cannons. Others were smaller, faster, with clawed limbs that could rip through steel like paper. Some crawled like insects, moving through the ruins with horrifying speed, hunting humans in the dark. The resistance fighters opened fire. Bullets bounced off the Omega Legion's armor. Explosives barely scratched them. For the first time since the invasion began, the resistance was outmatched. Hope in the darkness. Deep underground, in the last hidden bunkers of Earth, the leaders of the resistance gathered. Lucas Vance, Dr. Helena Carter, Akio Matsuda, Samuel Briggs, and the remaining survivors. They had surprised the Zyrex before. They had adapted. But this was something else. Lucas took a deep breath. He reached out, pressing his hand against the cold metal surface of a stolen Zyrex data drive. "We've always fought from the shadows," he said. Now, we have no choice. The others watched him, waiting, listening. Lucas exhaled. It's time to take the fight to them. The secret weapon. The war for Earth had changed. The humans had thought they were winning. They had used intelligence, strategy, and stolen technology to turn the tide against the Zyrex Empire. But now, the Omega Legion had arrived. The sky was black with Doom-class warships, their engines humming like a funeral song. Their presence alone choked the planet, blocking out the sun. The monstrous bioweapons they unleashed tore through Earth's last defenses like paper in a hurricane. For the first time since the invasion began, the humans were running. But even in the face of destruction, a new plan was forming. Because the humans still had one last weapon. And it was something the Zyrex could never have prepared for. The fall of the Resistance. The battle in New York City had lasted for hours. The underground resistance fighters had lured the Zyrex into a trap, collapsing entire buildings onto squads of armored warriors. But then, the Omega Legion arrived. The creatures were unstoppable. One of the 10-meter-tall warbeasts stomped through the ruins, its clawed feet crushing humans, metal and concrete alike. Bullets bounced off its blackened armor. Explosions did nothing. A group of resistance fighters fired stolen Zyrex weapons, aiming at its glowing red eyes. For a brief moment, the creature stumbled. Then, with a single movement, it swung its massive metal arm and obliterated the entire squad in a single hit. Fall back. Someone screamed, but there was nowhere left to run. Throughout the city, smaller Omega creatures, spiked, mechanical horrors that scuttled like insects, slithered through the ruins, crawling into underground hideouts and slaughtering survivors in the dark. By nightfall, New York belonged to the Zyrex again. And it wasn't just New York. London, Berlin, Tokyo, Moscow. Every resistance stronghold was crumbling. The Zyrex had unleashed their ultimate force. And now, humanity had nothing left. Or so they thought. The last meeting. Deep beneath the Rocky Mountains, in a hidden underground bunker, the last surviving leaders of the resistance gathered. The room was dimly lit, filled with flickering monitors and the distant echoes of explosions from the surface. Lucas Vance sat at the head of the table, his unseeing eyes fixed forward, listening to every sound in the room. Dr. Helena Carter, Akio Matsuda, Samuel Briggs, and a dozen other engineers, hackers, and fighters sat around him. "We can't fight them anymore," said Helena, her voice heavy. "Not like this." "We still have stolen Zyrex weapons," Briggs said. "We can." "They're useless against the Omega Legion," Akio interrupted, his face grim. "We've lost too many already." A long silence followed. The weight of defeat settled on their shoulders like a heavy fog. But then, Lucas smirked. "We were never going to win with brute force," he said. The others turned to him. "You have an idea?" Helena asked. Lucas leaned forward. "Not an idea. A plan. The kind of plan that ends this war." His fingers traced the edge of a small black data drive in his hand. "The Zyrex made a mistake," he said. "They'd brought machines to fight us. Machines powered by their technology. Machines controlled by their systems." He tapped the drive against the table. "And we've already proven we can hack their systems." The others stared. "You're saying?" Akio whispered, realization dawning in his eyes. Lucas nodded. "I'm saying we don't fight the Omega Legion. We turn it against them." The Ghost Code. For weeks, Lucas and his team had been working in secret. While the others fought on the front lines, Lucas had been studying the Zyrex technology, hacking into their ships, reading their code, learning how their AI functioned. And now he had done the impossible. He had written a virus. Not just any virus. A virus designed to corrupt the Omega Legion. A virus that could break the Zyrex's control over their own warbeasts. "I call it the Ghost Code," Lucas said, plugging the drive into a console. "Once we upload it to the Zyrex network, it'll spread through their entire system. the moment their warships connect with their ground forces. He smirked. The Omega Legion will no longer be theirs. A stunned silence filled the room. It's risky, Helena murmured. If they detect the virus before it spreads, they'll shut it down. Lucas shrugged. Then we make sure they never see it coming. The final infiltration. The plan was dangerous. To upload the ghost code, the Resistance needed to get it inside a Zyrex Doom-class warship. The problem? These ships were fortresses, filled with thousands of Zyrex warriors and security systems that could detect human presence instantly. The solution? A captured Zyrex ship, hacked and modified for one final infiltration mission. Akio and Samuel worked around the clock, disguising the stolen ship's signal so it would appear as Zyrex technology. We get one chance, Akio said. The moment we enter their fleet, we'll have exactly 10 minutes before they realize we don't belong. Helena nodded. That's all the time Lucas needs. And so, in the dead of night, a single Zyrex warship, or at least what looked like one, silently rose from the ruins of Earth. It drifted into the sky, joining the massive fleet above. Inside, Lucas and his team prepared for the most dangerous mission of their lives. The fall of the Empire. The sky above Earth was no longer blue. It was black, swallowed by the colossal Doom-class warships that loomed over the dying planet. Red lights glowed from their hulls, pulsing like the heartbeat of a monster. Below them, the Omega Legion continued its rampage. The bioweapons hunted in the ruins, wiping out the last human strongholds. They were unstoppable, programmed for one purpose: total extermination. The Zyrex had declared Earth lost. But deep inside enemy territory, hidden among the Empire's warships, the final battle had already begun. Because humanity had placed its last hope in one mission, and they were already inside the Zyrex fleet. The infiltration begins. A lone Zyrex warship drifted toward the command mothership, its engines humming softly. To the Zyrex fleet, it was just another patrol craft, returning from a ground mission. Inside, however, it was anything but Zyrex. Lucas Vance sat in the cockpit, his fingers flying over a stolen control panel. Lines of alien code flickered across the screen, running through his custom-built virus, the ghost code. Akio Matsuda stood next to him, watching the monitors. We've got 7 minutes before they realize we're not one of them. Plenty of time, Lucas said, smirking. Helena Carter was strapped into a harness behind them, clutching a tablet displaying the Omega Legion's neural network. If the ghost code worked, she would see every Zyrex bioweapon go offline. If it failed, no one wanted to think about that. Brace yourselves, Samuel Briggs called from the back. He and a small strike team of resistance fighters were armed and ready. The ship glided into the docking bay of the Zyrex mothership, the heart of the entire fleet. The moment the doors hissed open, Lucas whispered, "Game time." Into the beast's heart. The Zyrex war mothership was massive, a floating fortress of cold metal corridors, glowing alien symbols, and deadly security. The resistance fighters moved in silence, using stolen Zyrex armor suits to disguise themselves. They walked among the enemy, passing hundreds of alien soldiers who never suspected a thing. At the center of the ship was their target, the neural core, a massive glowing sphere of energy connected to the entire Zyrex war network. This was where the ghost code had to be uploaded. Almost there, Lucas whispered, his blind eyes focused on the tiny sounds around him. He could hear the hum of the core, feel the static charge in the air. They reached the main console. Lucas plugged in the drive. Lines of alien text cascaded down the screen. The virus was spreading. Then, an alarm blared. "They know we're here." Akio hissed. The Zyrex guards in the corridor stiffened, their glowing eyes snapping toward them. "Intruders," one of them roared. The first plasma shot exploded against the wall. And then, all hell broke loose. The battle for the neural core. Samuel Briggs ripped off his disguise, lifting a Zyrex plasma rifle and firing a burst of energy into the nearest guard. The alien screamed and fell, his armor sparking. The other fighters opened fire, blasting through the Zyrex ranks. Helena ducked behind a console, shouting, "Lucas, how much longer?" Lucas's fingers flew across the keys, his mind racing faster than ever before. The code's uploading. I just need 30 more seconds. We don't have 30 seconds, Samuel shouted, throwing a grenade down the corridor. The explosion ripped through the approaching Zyrex soldiers, but more kept coming. The room shook as an emergency lockdown triggered. Metal doors began slamming shut, trapping them inside. "We need a way out," Akio yelled. But Lucas wasn't listening. He was inside the Zyrex network now. The ghost code was spreading faster than expected. And for the first time, he could see it. Not with his eyes, but with his mind. The neural core's defenses fought back, trying to purge the virus. Lucas pushed harder. Sweat dripped down his face as he hacked deeper. The lines of code flickered, resisting him. And then, suddenly, the screen froze. A single message appeared in alien text. "Jost code executed." Lucas grinned. "It's done." The Omega Legion turns. Across Earth, in the middle of brutal battles, something changed. The Omega Legion, the Zyrex's unstoppable war machines, froze. The towering war beasts halted mid-step, their weapons flickering off. The smaller Omega creatures twitched, convulsing, their bodies locking up. Zyrex soldiers watched in confusion, shouting commands. Why are they stopping? Reactivate them. But the ghost code had already taken over. The Omega Legion was no longer theirs. In the ruins of Los Angeles, a group of survivors stood frozen in terror, staring at the 10-meter-tall war beast that had been about to crush them. Now, its red eyes flickered and turned blue. Slowly, it turned its head toward the Zyrex forces. And then, with a terrifying metallic roar, it charged at them. Throughout the battlefield, the Omega Legion switched sides. The Zyrex watched in horror as their own creations attacked them. The battlefield erupted into chaos. The Empire was no longer at war with humans. It was at war with itself. The fall of the Zyrex. Inside the war mothership, Lord Kragor watched the horror unfold. "The Legion, they are killing our own," his officers screamed. He stumbled back, his glowing eyes wide. "Impossible," he whispered. This is." His words trailed off, because he knew what it was. It was defeat. For the first time in the Zyrex Empire's history, they had lost. And they had lost to the weakest species in the galaxy. To humans. The last shot. Back inside the neural core room, Lucas, Helena, and the others were still fighting for their lives. More Zyrex guards rushed in, firing wildly. Samuel took a shot to the shoulder, but kept firing back. Then, an explosion rocked the ship. "The fleet is falling apart," Helena shouted. Lucas grabbed the console, feeling the vibrations of the collapsing ship. He took a deep breath. Time to end this. He reached out, found the final command, and executed it. A single word appeared on the screen. Override activated. Suddenly, every Zyrex warship lost power. Every fleet in orbit shut down. The entire Zyrex armada became lifeless husks. On Earth, the remaining survivors watched in awe as the Zyrex forces collapsed. The war was over. The truth about humanity. The war was over. The Zyrex Empire, the most feared force in the galaxy, had been crushed. Their once unstoppable Omega Legion had turned against them. Their mighty warships had been disabled, and their soldiers had been hunted down like prey. Humanity, the species they had dismissed as weak, had done the impossible. But victory is never the end of the story, because in the ruins of the war, buried deep within the wreckage of the Zyrex fleet, a dark secret was waiting to be uncovered. a truth about humanity that had been hidden for thousands of years. And when the survivors discovered it, it changed everything. The aftermath. Earth was in ruins. Entire cities had been leveled, billions of lives lost, and the planet itself scarred by war. But in the ashes of destruction, humanity had endured. The remaining Zyrex forces surrendered. Their leaders, once arrogant and cruel, now begged for mercy. Some humans wanted revenge. "Make them suffer," Samuel Briggs growled, standing in front of a group of Zyrex prisoners. His arm was wrapped in bandages, his body covered in scars. "They didn't show us mercy. Why should we?" But Dr. Helena Carter stepped forward, shaking her head. "Because if we become them, then we've already lost." And so, the humans did something the Zyrex never expected. They spared them. The surviving Zyrex were sent back to their homeworld, their once mighty empire shattered beyond repair. They were no longer the hunters. They were the hunted. But even as the last Zyrex ships left Earth's orbit, Lucas Vance knew something wasn't right. Because during the battle, while he had been inside the Zyrex network, he had found something. Something that shouldn't exist. And now he needed answers. The hidden files. Deep beneath the ruins of Washington, D.C., in the last remaining resistance bunker, Lucas sat alone in a dark room. In front of him, on a cracked and flickering screen, was a file he had stolen from the Zyrex mothership. It was labeled Project Degenesis, the Human Origin. Lucas hesitated. Then he took a deep breath and opened it. The screen filled with ancient text, strange symbols, and alien records. And as Lucas read them, his fingers froze over the keyboard. His breath caught in his throat. Because the Zyrex hadn't attacked Earth because they thought humans were weak. They had attacked because they had always known what humans really were. The truth about humanity. Thousands of years ago, long before human history was recorded, Earth was not an isolated planet. It had been part of something greater. A civilization older than the Zyrex Empire itself. A civilization so powerful, so advanced, so dangerous, that it had once ruled the galaxy. And humans, they were its last survivors. The Zyrex had known. They had always known. That was why they had erased Earth's history. That was why they had kept humanity isolated. That was why they had tried to destroy them before they could remember what they were. Because if humanity ever woke up, if they ever remembered what they had been, then the Zyrex would have never stood a chance. Lucas leaned back in his chair, his heart pounding. "We were never the weak ones," he whispered. "We were the monsters. The first human empire." Lucas continued reading. The records described an empire known as the Firstborn, a race of warriors, engineers, and explorers who had once dominated the stars. They had created weapons that could shatter planets, machines that could bend reality, and technology that made the Zyrex look like insects. But then, something had happened. Something worse than war. The Firstborn had vanished. No one knew why. But before they disappeared, they had erased their own history, wiping their knowledge from existence. They had sealed Earth away, turning it into a forgotten world, hiding the last remnants of their people. Hiding humans. But the Zyrex had found them. And out of fear, they had tried to wipe them out before they could remember the past. And they had failed. Lucas closed his eyes. A chill ran down his spine. Because if humans were truly the descendants of the Firstborn, then the war with the Zyrex had never really been a war. It had been an awakening. And now, the rest of the galaxy would see what the Zyrex had always feared. Humanity wasn't just another species. They were the last survivors of an ancient empire of conquerors. And now, they were back. The message from the stars. Days passed. The survivors of Earth began rebuilding. The ghost code had spread beyond Earth, disabling Zyrex fleets across the entire galaxy. The once mighty Zyrex Empire had fallen into chaos. Other alien species, long oppressed by the Zyrex, rose up in rebellion. The balance of power in the galaxy had shifted overnight. And at the center of it all was Earth. Lucas Vance sat in the control room of a captured Zyrex warship, staring at the stars beyond the viewport. For the first time, humanity wasn't trapped on a single planet. They had Zyrex ships, Zyrex technology, Zyrex knowledge, and most importantly, they had a message, a distress signal sent across the stars. Not by humans, not by the Zyrex, but by something else, an ancient signal, long buried, forgotten, now awakened, and it had only one word: return. Lucas exhaled. Looks like we're not alone. And for the first time in history, humanity was going back to the stars, not as the weakest species, not as the prey, but as the heirs of an empire. And this time, they weren't just fighting for Earth. They were fighting for their place in the galaxy. Epilogue. The beginning of something greater. The war with the Zyrex was over, but humanity's true battle had just begun. Because if the firstborn had vanished, then what had destroyed them? And worse, was it still out there?